r/nosleep. Posted by you/nslewis. I found a mask in the basement. I pulled the mask over my face and crept up the stairs, my excitement mounting with each creaky step. I felt the heat of my own breath, unable to fully escape through the mouth slit. When I got to the top, I cracked open the basement door and peered into the living room through 2 round eye holes. She wasn't there, but I knew where she was. I could hear tap water running. She was in the kitchen. I slipped off my shoes and walked slowly, carefully, across the hardwood floor. The rush of running water grew louder, and then I heard the sound of someone talking. Did she have visitors? I took a few more quiet steps. No. She was listening to a podcast over the speakers. I stuck my head around the corner, and there she was at the sink, her back towards me, her long brunette hair pulled up into a bun. I took a deep breath. It was hot in there, under that heavy mask. But I couldn't take it off. Not until it was done. It was time. I moved quickly until I was right behind her. I reached out and grabbed her shoulder. She snapped her head around, and as she got a look at me, I smiled behind the mask to see her eyes go wide in fear. I was prepared to end it there, but she screamed, and brought a knee up. Right into my balls. Oof. As I was hunching over, she gave me a shove and I crashed into the island behind me. I slumped to the ground in agony, and looked in real fear as she twirled around, grabbed a knife from the sink, and raised it up. Hold on. I groaned, pulling my mask off. It's me. When she saw me, she froze, the giant knife still there up in the air. I could tell that my wife was not very impressed. What the fuck are you doing? She asked. Where the fuck did you get that creepy mask? I coughed, still holding my hand up in the air in a plea for mercy. Down in the basement. I think it was Dad's, I said. I was. Just trying to give you a little scare. For fun. Jesus, Bill, said Debbie. I was ready to kill you. And honestly, I'm still not quite decided on that. There's not a jury in America that would convict me. Not after they saw the creepy-ass mask. Put the knife down, honey, I said. She threw the knife back into the sink and bent down. I was still crumpled in pain on the floor. Let me see that, she said, picking up the mask and then examining it. I guessed that it was made of stone. It was perfectly round, with 2 round eye holes at levels just different enough to cause a sense of unease. There was, as mentioned, a slit for a mouth. A row of sharp teeth was etched above and below the mouth. And then another row on top of those. It's heavy, said Debbie. And looks ancient. Do you think your father found this on one of his exhibitions? Yeah, I said, starting to recover a little. It was in a stash box down in the basement, along with a knife that looks like it's made of bone. I was gonna bring the knife up with me, but now I'm glad I didn't. We should get it assessed, said Debbie, running her fingers over the mask. Could be worth something. I'm sure it is, said, getting to my feet on wobbly legs. But I was hoping we could keep it. At least for a while. As a memento of Dad. I mean, if we ever need money, then yeah, we'll look into selling it. But we don't need money right now, not after the inheritance. And, well, I just still miss him, you know? Plus, it's a cool mask, isn't it? A good conversation starter. She handed the mask back. It's creepy. It scared the shit out of me, she sighed. If you want to hang it up somewhere, it's got to go in your study. Some place where I don't have to look at it. It was Roger Wentworth's retirement party. Old Roger had been my father's friend since they both started teaching at the college where I now taught. They spent many an evening sipping on scotch at my father's house, where I now lived. So when he finally announced his retirement, it only felt right to host the party. Derek Nielsen was in attendance. He was about my age, and also taught at the college. It turned out that we actually grew up in that same town, a few years apart. While my life had been pretty much easy street since day one, born to a well-off professor, and following in his footsteps, Derek's had been anything but. He came from a working-class family, and had lost his father at a young age. He never talked about it, but I knew that his childhood had been rough. Yet, he had clawed himself out of a life of misery to find success in the academic world. Most of the other professors at our college were the same as me, born and bred in a buttermilk world of soft pillows and fancy cars. Derek stood out to me, and we became fast friends. On the evening of Roger's party, as soon as I saw Derek walk in, I excused myself from the conversation that I was having. I went to the fridge, got 2 beers, and found Derek. Come on, I said. I want to show you something. You'll appreciate this. Derek took the beer and popped off the cap with a lighter. Sure thing, bud, he said. I led him to my study. I found this mask in a box of the old man's stuff. Check it out. I pointed up to the mask hanging from the wall. The bone knife was mounted just below it. Derek dropped his beer on the floor and went white. Is this some kind of sick fucking joke? He demanded. What? What do you mean a joke? The look of fear on Derek's face made me start to feel scared. It can't be the mask, can it? It's unsettling, but it's not terrifying like that. I need to sit down, said Derek. Sure, bud, I said, wheeling my desk chair over to him. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to scare you. I just thought you'd get a kick out of it, that's all. Derek looked at me with intensity. Tell me right now if this is a joke. I never told you about this, but maybe you found out anyway. I don't know what you mean, I said. I need a drink. Sure. Beer? Something hard, said Derek, now staring at the mask in bewilderment. I'll be right back. I stepped over the spilled beer and headed over to the liquor cabinet. Debbie was there, talking to somebody. I was starting to feel a little dizzy and things were blurring together. Where did you get off to? Asked Debbie. I showed Derek the mask, I said. It didn't go well. I poured out a tall scotch. We should really get rid of that thing. It's creepy. I gave a vacant nod and went back to my study. Derek was still sitting there, transfixed by the mask. I handed him the scotch and he looked at me with a start. He downed it in one gulp and then began. 35 years ago, my father committed suicide. Oh, I said, looking down at my shoes. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I don't tell people that. And I definitely don't tell them what happened after that. Look. Can you just bring the bottle in? I was glad to get out of the room for a moment. Things had gotten intense in there. I needed to know why Derek was having such an extreme reaction to the mask, and he was my friend, so I wanted to support him. I just didn't know if I was capable of hearing whatever he was going to say. I needed the bottle as much as him, or so I thought at the time. And I was right. I grabbed the bottle from the liquor cabinet and went directly back to Derek. I handed it to him and he took a good swallow. The coroner ruled my father's death a suicide. Open and shut, he said, no need to waste money on an autopsy. But my mother had different ideas. Do you know where my mother is now, Bill? No, I said. She's in the place where they pad the rooms and scribble in coloring books all day. I took a drink and passed the bottle back. Shit, Derek, I'm sorry. Derek laughed. It was a strange laugh, devoid of humor or any emotion at all. She said that it was the masked man that did it. She said she came in to find the masked man holding the bone knife, watching my father bleed out in the bathtub. She passed out and he was gone when she woke up. I looked at Derek in shock. What are you saying here? Derek took 2 swallows from the bottle. I'm saying I've seen that mask before. My mother's drawn it 1,000 times. The round face, the round eyes, the double teeth. That knife, too. The bone knife. I heard the words that he was saying, but I couldn't process them. Now you're the one fucking with me, I said at last. I gotta admit, for a minute there, you had me. Now come on and pass that bottle over. I'm calling the police, said Derek. Then he did. I remember when my parents had the basement redone. I was 10 years old. It was an old house, so the foundation used to be set on boulders with a dirt floor. It started to fail, so they spent a lot of money to have it all reinforced with concrete. A thick slab was poured on the floor. The bodies weren't difficult to find. The initials had been etched into the wet concrete, and when the floor was broken apart under police orders, each victim was resting right under his or her initials. 11 bodies in all. And those were only the ones in the basement. It's not clear how many there were, like Derek's father, that never made it down there. All of a sudden, my father's late nights at the office when I was a kid started to make sense. We've since moved out of the house, and it's on the market. Nobody will buy it. I don't blame them. Derek won't return my calls. I don't blame him. I never did anything wrong, but my father did things that were very wrong, and I am his son. I wish I'd never found that mask. The last body I ever cut open. Craig Brockwell was found by his wife, dead on their living room floor, a plastic garbage bag tied off around his neck, and an empty bottle of Xanax on the kitchen counter, next to a suicide note. My initial external examination of the body revealed no indications of a physical altercation with another person. Skin deep, the evidence was consistent with suicide by pills and suffocation. I was prepared to judge it such when Detective David Franklin requested an autopsy. It just doesn't sit right with me, said David. I mean, this guy. He had it all. Pulling in millions, kid's a superstar on the ball court, wife's a knockout. And then he goes and offs himself? I frowned. Depression can befall anyone, David, I said. And people can be quite adept at concealing it. Sure, Jim, sure. I get that. I guess that's not even what I'm talking about. It's just. You weren't there. At the scene. There was just. David looked around the room, though there was nobody else there. Something felt off, he said. That's all. What do you mean, off? Is there some other evidence that I'm not aware of? David sighed. Look, let's just say that you do this one for me, I'll owe you. Take you out for beers later, for a start. I looked down at Mr. Brockwell's corpse. Autopsies were invasive and expensive, and generally I avoided them unless there was a good reason to perform one. That was up to my discretion. But I suppose that a detective's intuition was a good enough reason. It's not like David made a habit of requesting autopsies. Okay, I said. I'll do the autopsy. But David, I don't drink. At time, it was true that I didn't drink. I made an incision along the body's chest and set down my scalpel. A look at the lungs would tell me whether or not suffocation had indeed been the cause of death. I began to peel back the skin and muscle. As I did, I looked in shock to see that there was nothing there. When I say that there was nothing there, I mean that it was totally black, like peering into a completely dark space, devoid of light. There should have been a ribcage there. There wasn't. There was nothing. I dropped the flaps of skin that I was holding and stood up. I shook my head. No, I thought, that's ridiculous. I knew that I had a headlamp around somewhere, so I went looking for it. I pulled open a drawer and that's when everything became silent. We grow accustomed to them, but we are surrounded constantly by sounds. The slight buzz of the electric lights above us, the hum of the boiler in the basement, the sound of our own breath, the rustle of our clothes as we move. The sound of opening a drawer. None of it was there. It was as though I had gone completely deaf. I don't know why, exactly, but I had a sudden urge to look at the body on my examination table. I turned my head, but it turned far slower than I intended, as though I were losing control of my body, or time had slowed down, or the room had become thick with some invisible substance. The dead and naked body was just as I had left it, of course, with the incision along its chest, and the skin there curled back slightly from where I had begun to peel it. All at once, a rush of sound returned to my ears, and my movements resumed their typical speed. I shook my head once again and turned back to the drawer. I found the headlamp, strapped it to my head, and went back to the body. I flipped on the light, opened the skin up again, and gazed into utter darkness. There was nothing there. The darkness consumed the light from the headlamp. It seemed endless. I steadied myself and tore the skin back further. Instead of the rib cage and bits of tissue, there was only the nothingness. I tentatively stuck a finger into it. As soon as I did, the silence returned, and everything slowed down again. My finger felt incredibly cold, like touching dry ice. I withdrew it as quickly as I could, which was not very quickly at all. It was like coming out of quicksand, but once I was out, the expected pace of reality fell back into place. I jumped back and picked up my scalpel. I made a deep slice along the right thigh and pulled up the skin. More nothingness. I repeated the procedure on the left thigh to the same result. My hands were shaking and my mind was in blank shock. My mind was as empty as the body in front of me. Nothing could explain this. I walked around to the head and made a cut around the circumference of the crown. I peeled the flesh away and there was nothing. As I stared into it, I froze. I stood holding the severed scalp, staring into the nothingness, unable to do anything else. I don't know how long I was in that state, but the sound of David's voice snapped me out of it sometime later. "How's it going down here, Jim?" I dropped the piece of dead flesh and hair that I had been holding and turned to look at David. "This is very bizarre. I have never seen anything like this. I can't explain it." "And how's that?" asked David. I pointed to the body. "Just look," I said. David walked across the room and peered into the darkness. "What the fuck?" he whispered. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know." David started reaching inside the head. "I wouldn't do that," I cautioned. He ignored me, and kept reaching. Then his hand was inside the head. He froze suddenly, except for his eyelids, which opened wide in shock. "David?" I said. "Pull your hand out. Now." David's eyes got even wider. He was trying to say something, but his lips wouldn't open. It came out muffled, but I had no doubt that he was trying to say, "Help." All at once, David jerked forward 2 feet, so that he was now into the body up past his elbow. The look on his face grew more frantic and desperate. I grabbed onto his other arm and yanked, but it was no good. The body was stronger, and was pulling him in, now up the bicep. I watched in pure horror as the head seemed to expand in size, as if it were growing larger so that it could suck in all of David. Instinct took over and I ran to my tray of tools. I grabbed my bone saw and switched it on as I made my way back to David. I applied the saw to his shoulder, which was now mere inches away from the terrible maw of nothingness. I drove the saw in furiously, blood splattering on my face, the muffled would-be screams of David trying to assert themselves over the whir of the saw. At last, I cut through the bone and David fell back on me, so that I hit the ground with him on top of me. I could see the last of his severed arm disappear into the nothingness. Now that his lips would open again, David was wailing in agony. I rolled out from under him, and went to work on cauterizing the wound, praying that he wouldn't die. I paused long enough to dial 911, and explained the need for help over the speakerphone function as I performed the surgery. I sat by the hospital bed until David regained consciousness. He looked at me with terrified eyes and grabbed my wrist with his remaining hand, his fingernails digging into me. "I saw it," said David. "I still see it. Nothing. That is what I am, and what you are. Everything is nothing." I broke free of his grip. "That's absurd," I said. "I don't know how to explain that body, but I know that I am not nothing." David started laughing then. I left him at the hospital, went home, and had my first drink in 2 years. I knew that it was a horrible mistake, but I did it anyway, to wash away the horror. When I was drunk enough, I resolved to return to the morgue, determined to burn Craig Brockwell's body. I got in my car, like a monster, and drove, weaving across the road. When I arrived, I flung the door open, my mind and body overtaken by the alcohol. I looked into the room, and even through my drunken haze, it registered that something was very, very wrong. The body was gone. Craig Brockwell's attempted autopsy happened 10 years ago. For a year afterwards, I drank. I lost my job, refusing to return back to work. I burned through my savings, and by the end of the year, I had hit rock bottom, as it's called. That was shortly after Detective David Franklin committed suicide. Now I have my life back together. I still have nightmares, but I have for the most part put the incident behind me. I have a loving family, and a new career. I cannot express how grateful I am for this new life. But yesterday, I saw something. I left my office at 5 p.m. as usual, and walked across the parking lot to my car. I got in, started it up, and checked my rear view mirror. Standing there was a man. It was, unmistakably, David Franklin. I turned my head and looked out the back window. He was still there. He opened his mouth and there inside was endless darkness. The world grew silent, and I watched, unable to move, as he lifted his only arm and pointed a finger at me. Then he turned and walked away. The man in my wife's garden. I looked out the kitchen window and saw my wife lying on the ground, in her garden. The glass of water I was holding slipped through my fingers and shattered, jagged bits of glass scattering across the hardwood floor. I ran barefoot through it all, and threw the back door open. Now I saw a man standing over my wife. He hadn't been there a moment ago. He wore a purple suit made of some shimmering material, and had black hair slicked back to his neck. My wife was looking up at him with wide eyes. I ran toward them, shouting, "Hey! Get away from her!" The man turned his head to me and I saw a young and smooth face, with perfectly proportioned features. He raised an eyebrow. "You can see me," he said. "Interesting." I threw my shoulder into him, knocking him out of the way, and bent down to my wife. "Lisa," I said. "Lisa, what's wrong?" She was still staring at the man. I ran my hand over her cheek. "Lisa." "She's had an aneurysm in the brain, I'm afraid," said the man. "Call 911. Please." I pleaded with him, though I had no idea who he was or what he was doing standing over my wife. "At best, you can keep her body alive for the day," said the man. "With a breathing tube, and all manner of blipping machines. But her mind is already gone. Better to let me do my work and be gone in a flash." I sat crouched over Lisa as my mind reeled from the seeming impossibility of what was happening. Lisa. My Lisa was dying. She was only 62 years old. This wasn't supposed to happen. A rush of anger overtook me and I stood up. I grabbed the lapels of the man's suit in both hands and growled at him. "If you touch her, I will kill you." I considered making him come inside with me to get my cell phone, which was charging on a side table alongside Lisa's. But I didn't want to waste any more time. I gave him a shove. As the man fell back, the front of his suit tore open at the chest, and I looked in shock to see that there was no chest there, only a naked ribcage of white bone. "What are you?" I asked in a whisper. "I am Death, Michael," and I've come for your wife." I looked down at Lisa and saw that her eyes were closed now. But she was still breathing. "No," I said. Desperation welled up inside of me and I leapt, my arms stretched out in front of me, reaching for Death's neck. I connected, and my fingers wrapped around his chilled flesh, like grasping an icicle. I squeezed. Death's blue eyes opened wide in surprise as I choked him. He was trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come out of his mouth. I discovered quickly that they didn't need to come out of his mouth at all. They seared into my mind, voiceless, but sharp and clear. "You cannot stop me, Michael. You must allow me to do my necessary work, or there will be consequences." I didn't care about consequences. Still holding him by the neck, I began slamming his head against the tilled dirt. Again and again, straining with all of my strength, my eyes blurred with tears. "You can't have her," I screamed. "She's already mine, Michael. All things are, as soon as they enter the world. I came for Caesar, and I came for the Son of God. I will come for you too one day. But not today. Today I come for Lisa." A stream of black blood began to pour out of the back of his head as I continued to smash it against the ground. "I won't let you take her. It's not fair." "Enough." Death reached up and grabbed my wrists with an iron grip, easily pulling them apart and away from his neck. "Enough," he gasped. A foul stench came out of his mouth when he spoke. "I understand that you're upset. I can assure you that your wife will feel no pain." I crawled over to Lisa, physically and emotionally exhausted, my feet bloodied from the broken glass, leaving a trail of red behind me. "Will she go to heaven?" I asked in between ragged breaths. "I can't tell you that," said Death, getting to his feet. "It's beyond your ability to understand." I bent down and kissed Lisa's forehead. How could she die? How was it possible? Was it all for nothing? How could I go on living without her? She was my life. I stood up slowly and brushed the dirt off my pants. "Okay," I said. "You can have her." Death smiled. "That's good. I'm not sure how you're seeing me. It happens sometimes. But when they try to stop me, well, it doesn't end well for anybody involved." He took a step towards Lisa. "Like I said, it will be painless, and over soon." Then he was standing next to me, beginning to bend down. I had one chance, and I took it. I reached quickly into where his chest should be and grasped a rib bone. With all of my strength, I snapped it off of the rib cage and pulled it out. In the same motion, I stabbed the jagged bone into the side of Death's head. For a terrible moment, the screaming filled my mind and seemingly every cell in my body. It was a scream of pure anguish. Then it stopped. I watched in mad triumph as Death slumped to the dirt, the bone stuck in his head, a gush of black blood flowing around it. His eyes stared, unmoving, at a red wheelbarrow. I rushed down to Lisa, wanting to shake her, but afraid to. "Hang on, my love," I said. "Hang on. I'm just going to call the ambulance now. I'll be right back, okay? I'll be right back. Just hang on. Please." I stood up and turned to run back into the house, and there, standing just behind me, was that same man in the purple suit, with the same blue eyes and the same pure black hair. No. I looked in bewilderment to see that the same body was also still lying there on the ground, apparently dead. "Now there will be pain, Michael," he said. I reached back a fist in one last desperate attempt to stop him, but I knew that it was over. I didn't have any strength left. I took a wild swing and Death caught my fist in his hand. He squeezed it until I was sure there were several broken bones, and then shoved me back to the ground. My head landed next to Lisa's. As I hit the dirt, her eyes snapped open and she began screaming. She was in obvious agony, her eyes darting back and forth, trying in vain to find some place to escape the pain. I clutched her hand. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I tried. I love you so much." But she couldn't hear me. I couldn't even hear myself, over the screaming. I looked at Death, who stood there impassively pointing a finger at my wife. "Please," I shouted. "End it." Death nodded slowly, then took a step forward and bent down. He touched Lisa's forehead, and the screaming stopped. I felt her hand relax in mine. She was gone. Death straightened up and looked down at me. I began beating on the dirt with my broken fist, wailing. But I caught his words, a moment before he disappeared. "Until we meet again."